coming and is now here, when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. Alleluia,
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
The Samaritan woman said to Jesus, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this holy mountain, but you say that the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know. For the salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming, and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Every church that is built, including this one, lives always in the middle of a paradox. On the one hand, it's a place where the community gathers, comes together to encounter God, to be with God, to pray on a regular basis. And yet, even as we do so, we recognize that God cannot be contained by this or any other space. God cannot even be contained by the vastness of the universe. So we live and come and worship, finite people that we are, in the middle of that paradox, if you will. Jacob had that experience. Truly, the Lord was in this place, and I did not know it. We hear the beginning of that story, but in fact, right before it, Jacob is on the run. He has one very angry sibling, He stole the birthright from Esau. And he is afraid that Esau will want his head on the chopping block, that he will do him violence. And so he runs for his life. Absolutely exhausted, he stops in this barren, god-awful place. No grass, just rocks. And he lays his head down, looking up at the stars. And he has this astonishing revelation of, if you will, a kind of a hole in the sky and a ladder with angels going up and down. Truly, God is in this place, and I did not know Before that, Jacob did not have any real relationship with God in a kind of a meaningful sense. He comes out of that event knowing truly that God is with him. May it be so for every single one of us. Every single one of us. Coming into this space or out of this space or the other spaces, the holy places in our life. Our church right now is going through a time of reflection, of learning, of listening, of thinking about how we are as church. We are following the invitation of Pope Francis to revitalize the very heart, the very innards of the church, the way the whole church thinks and prays and reflects and decides together. And we ourselves, here at St. John's, in a parallel track, are looking at the revitalization of this church, blessed and dedicated 60 years ago. Pope Francis is absolutely convinced that we are baptized and become missionary disciples. So that even as we come into this church, we never really leave the world. And in this space in particular, we're always aware of grass, flowers, sunshine, snow, sleet, cold, and the changing of the light. And it reminds us of Pope Francis's missionary vision for us, that even as we come together to pray, to gather, to become stronger, to be nourished, that in fact we will go out to be the gospel for the world. Pope Francis is convinced that this kind of missionary evangelism is oriented into a world in which there are a lot of people who have been crushed low by poverty, by violence, by racism, and sometimes by simply a lack of missionary and pastoral, if you will, imagination on the part of the church. In the words of Father Brian Massengale, I think Pope Francis is telling us in no uncertain terms that the church of the future will be browner, it will be poorer, and it will be more feminine. That is, it will be transformed by the very processes that he is hoping we will engage. That is, by including more and more of the people who are actually here on this earth and part of the believing community in the decision-making processes of the church. Pope Francis wants us to be fearless, to be willing to let go of habits that are simply no longer helpful. Whether it's habits of worship, habits of deciding, habits of thinking. He's not thinking that we're going to let go of the tradition, but rather that we'll be more willing to dwell with questions, to live with questions more than with answers. This doesn't mean that we're going to turn into a bunch of know-nothingers, where we don't have anything to say. But it just means that we'll be more comfortable to really do deep listening and to entertain questions we haven't in the past. And to let them have time on the floor. And to listen to those who in fact have been on the outer edges and whose voices we have not heard so clearly in the past. This is a big space. It speaks, to me at least, to this child of God. It always speaks of welcome, like arms open. It speaks of a large-souled church. And it speaks of a mercy of God that is bigger than anything we can imagine. The church has some things that are kind of locked down, like the altar. You're not going to move it before the 10:30 Mass. At the same time, there's plenty of space for gathering, for processing, for walking, for being with each other. The space speaks of the kind of generosity that this kind of renewal work and revitalization in the church is going to need. Being Benedictines, as we begin this work of revitalization of this space, we will follow Benedict's counsel and pray to God that he will bring it to completion. We will need God's help, big time. As we, in a parallel way, do the work of revitalizing the listening, discerning, deciding processes in the church. We need to heed Paul's compelling words that we are the body of Christ, inflamed by the power of the Spirit, that we are nourished. We come together nourished by word and sacrament, and that we are sent into the world to be the gospel for the world. A powerful message from Pope Francis, but also embedded deeply in what we are doing here today.